This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Quiet on the set. Soon we will all be more informed.
We appreciate learning more of our region's news and public affairs. Cameras rolling.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. As alleged clergy sex abuse investigations continue, we may have seen indications this week of what lies ahead, including an affidavit that raised questions about what church leadership has known. There was good news for one church-affiliated institution, however, as Xavier University and Ochsner Health officially announced the formation of a new medical school. Elsewhere, in a week when Police Chief Anne Kirkpatrick was being acknowledged for her first 6 months on the job, she and other officials got to show their firmness and diplomatic skills in dealing with demonstrators. She may have another big decision in her future now that the City Council has approved the hiring of an independent firm to investigate the relationship between the mayor and her security guard. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Ramon Vargas, weekend news editor and reporter, The Guardian; Will Sutton, columnist, The Times-Picayune, The New Orleans Advocate; and Missy Wilkinson, staff writer, The Times-Picayune, The Advocate. Missy, we're going to stick with you because we saw in the city of New Orleans pro-Palestinian protest and demonstrations, different ones in different areas of the city. So what occurred? How many were there? How many people involved? And how were they controlled?
That's a good question. So it's hard to put an exact number on the number of protests that we've seen even over the last week, let alone the last 7 months. But I think that some of the most significant ones occurred on Tulane University's campus and on Jackson Square and in the City Council chambers earlier this week. Today, more than 800 Tulane students issued a letter to officials decrying their response to those protests, asking the school to divest its economic ties with Israel tech companies and fuel companies. So that's probably the biggest one. And it follows a wave of similar protests nationwide. There have been thousands of arrests after encampments have sprung up on colleges' campuses across the country.
So we had a couple of encampments. One first was in Jackson Square. That was last weekend. How big was that? How many people were involved in that one, would you say?
That one, I don't know exactly how many people were involved. However, 14 people were arrested in connection with that encampment. And 5 officers actually went to the hospital with injuries because that one, unfortunately, did become violent. When the park closed at around 7 p.m., that was when officers said everyone has to leave. The encampment had sprung up Sunday afternoon, tents, people eating food, and they did not want to leave, some of them. And there were some trespassing charges. People allegedly locked the gate, beat officers with 2x4s, rocks. Allegedly, one person took a sign that had been used in an engagement, and that kind of became a weapon. But ultimately, protesters were also injured, and allegedly, they said, by police.
So were students involved in this, or were these other folks?
It's hard for me to know the exact breakdown of everybody there. I will say that of the 14 arrested, only one said that they were an alumni of Tulane. If anybody else was a student, that did not come out during their bond setting where they say things like where they work, where they live.
Right. But it was different over there at Tulane campus to a point, to a degree.
Yes, and I think that the major difference is that it wasn't that violent at Tulane. You didn't see people going to the jail on allegations that they had battered officers or on hate crimes, which was good. They just remained in place basically when on private property on a private campus. The people that were arrested, which was more than a dozen pro-Palestinian protesters at Tulane, and they actually were released on their own recognizance. They were not booked onto jail. And our district attorney, Jason Williams, had a big issue with that. He felt that they should have been because they could pose safety risks. And his court wasn't able to basically assess their backgrounds.
And so there were actually encampments there. And where exactly was it? Was it right off St. Charles, right in front of the main building?
It was right there in the 6600 block of St. Charles Avenue, right between Audubon Park and that front building of Tulane.
And how long were these folks camped out there?
They were out there for more than 24 hours. They started setting up on Monday. They were broken up around 3 a.m. on Wednesday, early Wednesday morning.
So what's it looking like now over there at the campus?
It's a tense scene. I was out there this morning. There are very tall fences erected. They look to be taller than 8 feet. Tulane University police are posted up quite visibly at intervals in front of the campus. It's a quiet piece, but it is also a very tense piece, and I think students are feeling that as well.
And we did see some demonstrations in the streets of New Orleans, too, over this past week as well.
Yeah, Poydras was briefly closed last week by protesters around rush hour. City Council, about 50 protesters were present there yesterday petitioning council members to place a ceasefire resolution on the agenda. Largely, these protests have been very peaceful, and not all of them have, though, and some have been disruptive as well.
Okay, so right now there are no protests going on, but would we anticipate more in the future? Do you know? Have you heard anything regarding that?
Yes, I am assured that there are more by the pro-Palestinian protesters. They have said, especially with Tulane, just because the semester is over doesn't mean that this movement is over.
Okay. All righty, Missy. Thanks a lot. Ramon, over to you. We heard about the state police, Louisiana State Police, with a warrant for the archdiocese, going into the archdiocesan offices. Big story here. What have we learned?
Well, the state police troopers who were investigating a child sex trafficking case, a case of possible child sex trafficking, have demanded records that from the Archdiocese of New Orleans that cover the entire history of the decades-old, clergy abuse scandal. Some of the allegations in the warrant that gave probable cause for, and it was signed off by a magistrate, criminal court magistrate, judge, and some of those allegations are involve, pretty glaring allegations of sex trafficking. The idea, one of the allegations is a gift being given to one child from one priest who abused that child and then brought it to another priest who abused that child. We've got this idea of children being brought to the seminary, which is right next to the archdiocese, trains the archdiocese priests, being abused at the swimming pool. And so that investigation was produced by an investigation to one individual priest, Lawrence Hecker, who admitted to, when you look at his file, spoke with, Archbishop Hannon in 1988, spoke again with Archbishop Schulte in 1996. Records established that, Archbishop Alfred Hughes knew about his past, and current Archbishop Gregory Amond also knew about his past at the latest in 2011, but then was also copied on some communications involving his dealings with Schulte, and so it goes back, decades for sure.
So the state police and the warrant that they had in this information comes from the investigation into Hecker.
It brought in from there. There's also, the warrant makes mention of a 48-page document, which the Guardian reported on in August of 2023, which it was written by attorneys who represent clergy abuse claimants in the ongoing bankruptcy case with the church, and I mean the memo obviously alleges that there were a number of priests, multiple, that the church could have outed earlier, and then made decisions that sort of concealed both their alleged abuse and their identities, concealed them for years.
Now the state police are seeking all documents, all information. Have they gotten those yet?
So we know that they met in a few days after the warrant was obtained in late April, and we know that there was like a meeting in which they discussed. We know that some sets of documents have been turned over because of the Lawrence Hecker investigation, but then I think the other ones, they're really treating it like a subpoena as more than like a search warrant where they kick in the doors and take out boxes of documents. It's more they gave them a document and they're giving them time to gather stuff over and then turn it over. Obviously, it's going to take a while given the volume of documents.
First of all, I want to acknowledge to you, who's been like the key person. This is a huge story. I don't know if people realize it, but it's gotten national coverage around the country, and maybe people are sensitized to it now that they've heard so much. But if people realize all that's being said there is really, really shocking. I mean, do you hear any internal movement, like within the church? I mean, I know there are a lot of people, good people, who are really upset by it, but is there anything going on? Or
my colleague on many of these stories is David Hammer, and him and I, I think on an individual basis, I heard from one reader who described pulling their children out of Catholic schools after the story on the warrant broke, after WWL and The Guardian broke the story on the warrant. There was a number of, kind of on that level. Obviously, you haven't seen, always wondering if there's ever going to be an organized movement among, Archbishop Amon's subordinates, if they're going to make a comment on his leadership. So far, we haven't seen that. But certainly to see state police in a sworn statement make some of the allegations that they made, I think that it remains to be seen, who gets charged, if anyone, from here. But I think to see those allegations made under oath is a significant step, and one that I don't think anyone imagined happening about a year ago.
It's stomach turning, and just to hear sex trafficking associated with the archdiocese is just absolutely shocking. So when do you think we will hear more? As you just said, will we actually have names come forward?
I think you'll see. Look, the bankruptcy is a whole other kind of narrative that's playing out, right? So it's not only an investigation it's not only a child sex trafficking investigation. It's one into an organization that filed for bankruptcy almost 4 years ago to the day to conceal a lot of its own internal records that were being, I think, produced in civil lawsuits. So you'll probably see some fighting over how fast that process should go while this criminal investigation is playing out, which could lead to more, to more revelations.
And this is affecting parishioners because they already have lawsuits and settlements they have to pay for. And so there are closing of parish churches, emerging of parish churches, and that's with information we know.
Sure.
And this could lead to even more financial burden.
Yeah, I think that you're going to see a big fight about how long the bankruptcy should go, how quickly it should move, and I think that the pending criminal case is going to play a role in that for sure.
And meanwhile, Hecker is still awaiting trial, right?
Hecker is still awaiting trial. There's a psychiatric opinion that he is not competent to stand trial. Everyone is waiting for a hearing later in May to see whether a judge endorses that opinion, and if so, how long that could of a delay that could result in. Keep in mind, he's 92, so a significant delay could be decisive in that case.
And Stephanie Regal had a story about the legal issues, and she says some of these cases are way past the statute of limitations now.
There's some cases, yes, I mean, you're right. I mean, given all the abuse that occurred there is a broad number of cases that are past their statute of limitations. Source information, right? And I think we've indicated as much. Some of those acts that are drawing very close looks do not have statute of limitations, which is going to determine how, accompanying statute of limitation on when they should have been reported, and whether, whether there's other people that maybe didn't have a direct hand in any of the acts, but then, enabled them on the back end.
Much more to be reported on this story, and I know you will. Thanks a lot, Ramon. All right. Okay, well, over to you. Some good news that we heard this week. There's going to be another med school in our region.
Absolutely. Xavier Ochsner have comboed partnership. They've already had partnerships for several years to build students and new doctors and other health professionals in New Orleans, the region, and Louisiana. But this is a really next big step. This is not opening a new medical school. This is identifying a space where they will operate, which is the first and third floors at Benson Towers.
You mean not building another bricks and mortar building?
That's right, yeah. So they're, and there's space in Benson Towers. So this is going to help Benson Towers. It's going to help the Bio District. They won't be a competitor to Tulane and LSU because they'll have a different focus, which is to get some bright black minds, whether they're pre-med students at Xavier or elsewhere, and bring them into this new program and train them, with Ochsner being involved to the level that they are with rotations and building into classroom professionals. And the new dean of the school is an Ochsner executive. So they're not in it to see it fail. They're in it to win it. And accreditation is a big step. So that's going to take about 3 years. And then they'll have their first class of 50. And they'll become either the 5th or the 6th historically black institution with a medical school, because Morgan State identified their lease space for their osteopathic medical school in 2022. So they're a little ahead on that, but they still have to work on accreditation.
Yeah, and Dr. Leonardo Swani, right?
Yes.
He's the dean,
Yep.
and he's at Ochsner, and Ochsner and Xavier are already having a working relationship in the health field, right?
They do, and they've got several programs and connections there. A number of Xavier's pharmacy students and other students, pre-med students, already work with Ochsner facilities. So I kind of been thinking about this recently, as you get to be an Ochsner intern and fellow before you get to that step.
Oh.
And I also been thinking about it in terms of somebody who comes to Xavier, as many people do, as a freshman, stay there for 4 years. But if you're a pre-med student, it's likely that you could be here for 7, 8, 9 years, and that sounds like home.
Yeah, they sort of start to plant roots over that course of time. So do we have a physician shortage here?
We have a physician shortage across the nation, and that is regardless of background, race, ethnicity. We have a physician shortage. And we particularly have a physician shortage in this nation because fewer than 1 in 10 doctors produced by the existing medical schools are black. And so with a nation of black folks around 13, 15%, that's a lot of people who are not seeing people like them. I'll use myself as an example. I have black doctors, I have Asian doctors, I have white doctors. I appreciate having a black doctor as my primary care. We talk about things differently. And I'm not going to stop using the other doctors because they're not black. But it's a good thing for a black person to have the option of having a black doctor or two in their mix as they seeking health care.
And so this new medical school is seen as creating more opportunities for that to happen.
Well, absolutely, and they're working on what are the specialties they want to focus on, because that plays into accreditation, because you have to meet the standards to get the accreditation.
All right, so still some more legwork.
Quickly, the new Delgado Nursing School, right on the edge of City Park, it's a nice building. I haven't been there, but it's a nice building. But that's a good step and a good rest, because there's a nursing shortage too.
That's right. That's right.
Sure,
Absolutely.
Yeah. For healthcare workers, we need them.
We need them.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Back over to you, Missy, because NOPD Superintendent Anne Kirkpatrick now here for 6 months, and she's kind of getting good grades.
Yeah, she is. Even by her own admission, she feels good about some things she's accomplished. It was a pretty straightforward 3-point agenda that she set out, and I got the chance to talk with her about it at the 6-month mark. You know, her first thing was continue to drive down this violent crime, and we've been seeing that. We've been seeing these sharp declines that are outpacing national drops, and so she felt good about that. The other thing is achieve consent decree compliance. We are on track to begin a step-down monitoring period perhaps within the year. There's been a real turnaround on that front. And the one thing that she wasn't 100% satisfied with was our recruiting for our NOPD officers. She had hoped to get a couple hundred more officers. We're still hovering around 900. But the good news is that of the applicant pool, we're seeing more of those people actually become officers than had in the past. And we're not shrinking anymore. The ship has started to right itself, and we're sort of going in the right direction, albeit not as quickly as Chief Kirkpatrick had hoped.
And so what about the community? What is the community saying about her? I mean, she was at a community meeting fairly recently, right?
Yeah.
And some people were critical.
Yeah, and I think it was unusual and commendable that she even put herself in an audience that is not necessarily receptive to some actions by law enforcement. It was the No Cop group, and they were calling basically for community oversight with more teeth than what the existing structures currently allow. So they really want to create some kind of panel or oversight that has a civilian that can oversee discipline, that is more of a part of hiring and firing of chiefs. And she was really a hard no. That was really a hard no from her, and that didn't go over well because it is, of course, that kind of basically civilian intervention that landed her in New Orleans because she was terminated from the Oakland Police Department a few years back, which turned out to be retaliatory. So she was very against that.
And she won a court case on that of $1.5 million
She did.
settlement for that too.
Pretty handsome
so yes, so
settlement.
she doesn't think too much of those civilian commissions then.
Right. She thinks that we should work within the structures that we already have. Our independent police monitor, our PCABs. She wants to see those bolstered and strengthened. But you know, it's easy to see why the community wants more of a voice and wants more communication and transparency from leaders. And she's on board with that too. Just not with a different structure, just working within the confines of what we have.
Was she go ahead.
That would have happened whether it was Kirkpatrick or somebody else, because they were pushing that agenda during the search process. I went to a number of the community meetings, and they were there making that point without knowing who the next chief would be. So it's not like it's directed at Kirkpatrick. Whoever's in that seat, this is what we want to see.
Well, Oliver Thomas supports that idea, does he not?
Yes.
The commission?
Yes.
And he did not vote for her.
No.
But he sort of changed his position on her, has he not?
That is what he said. I asked him about that, and he said that she has earned his respect.
Very much
over the last 6 months.
And so to follow up on that commission, though, and Oliver Thomas's support of it, he also does recognize that it can be good or it can be bad. That's the quote that, sort of a quote, essentially expressing his opinion about that, the piece that you had.
Yeah, and what he's doing right now with working with community members is they're studying other models in other cities where there's civilian oversight with a little bit more teeth to see what's effective and what kind of has not worked.
But we do have an independent monitor right now, police monitor.
Yes.
That is in place right now. It has been for several years.
Yes.
I think Oliver Thomas also felt that some decisions were being made a little bit too quickly without full consultation with the council. We saw that with the decision about the new police building, okay? Everybody said, hey, great idea, and Thomas said, well, not right now, let's talk about it. And he held out. I mean, ultimately, he changed his mind. He's for it now. But I think that's what he's fighting for. He just lets, hey, deal us in here.
Yes, I think they felt blindsided by that decision to an extent.
Yeah.
But they are starting to move in, are they not, in that new building?
Yeah, it does
Well,
seem-
their new headquarters, not a new building, but new headquarters for them.
Yeah, that process is underway. And
So they're moving over there. Okay, and that's on where? On Porges, across from the Dome, right?
in the
That's where
DXC
they're be-
building.
Yeah. Okay. All righty, Missy. Thanks. E, over to you. You wanted to talk about council making the decision to bring in an outside firm to take a look at the Officer Vappy situation.
Yeah, well, the incident a couple of weeks ago when the mayor and Officer Vappy were photographed having, I don't know if it was dinner or lunch in the French Quarter, but that just touched off the discussion that had been going on as far as their travel plans and his working overtime and that sort of thing. And so this got it moving. You know, this is why a city needs a Metropolitan Crime Commission. This is not the kind of thing that a citizen would go and complain about. It takes somebody like a Metropolitan Crime Commission, which was established in the 1950s to deal with public corruption, to look at this and say, this is not the proper procedure. There may not be a crime here, but it's not the way that things are supposed to be done. And even it took somebody like Rafael Goyeneche, who's the president of it, to look at that picture and say, if he's security, he should be sitting over here and not over there.
And let's
okay?
take a look at the picture.
Yeah.
It's of the Mayor Cantrell, and Officer Vappy enjoying a nice balcony lunch in
Yeah,
the French
yeah.
Quarter a couple of weeks ago.
And so that really got people talking, and then some people pointed out, if a photographer can get that close, how about somebody with a gun? Lee Zurich, the question is, was he on duty at that time? And Lee Zurich at Fox 8 has reported that he was. And so people said, you know, we really got to enforce the rules on this. So what the council did yesterday, and what the police chief had really kind of insisted, is that you have an independent firm investigate this, a law firm that deals with labor law and litigation law. So it's a firm called Transcendent, which is out of New Orleans. It's in Mid-City, and and they deal with a lot of specialty type issues. So the council, you have to vote at a contract for them, $85,000 for a period of 1 year. And I don't think anybody thinks it's going to take as long as a year, but they're going to allow that to do that independent investigation. Once it's done, and there's and as Gordon Ishii points out, this is not really about the relationship between Cantrell and Vappy. It's about the procedures, how they're followed. Once it's done, they're going to give some recommendations to the police chief, and it's going to be up to her to decide if a recommendation is that they be removed, or they be fired, or they just let it go. I don't know, but it's a step that we've never seen before, where you have an independent monitoring firm.
Okay, well, there had been investigation done by the police department, within the police department.
And there was, and people reviewed, and Federal Judge Morgan looked at it and said, well, this seems okay. But it's Kirkpatrick who said, but there's other things that need to be raised. And she was the one who really brought up the issue of we need to go another step and bring this in.
Okay, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
Other stories, staying with you, E.
Well, yesterday will be a great day in Louisiana political dialogue. And this was the exchange between Mick Jagger and Governor Landry, okay? When Mick Jagger criticized Governor Landry, who apparently was in the audience, and said he's bringing us back into the Stone Age, right? Which is not a real good politic to say. And Governor Landry showed himself quick with the quip, and also with Twitter, or X, what you want to call it, and said, well, you are in the Stone Age, okay?
If anybody knows about the Stone Age, it would be Mick Jagger, yeah.
And they kind of went back and forth. But he assured Louisiana loves you, and you're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, Louisiana definitely did love him yesterday, didn't they? Mick Jagger. I don't think Mick Jagger is really worried about politics that much, or whether or not he's perceived to be a good politician or not. He's a great singer and a great entertainer. People had fun. Ramon, over to you.
I was just asking people to stick with us. We should have more in the coming days on things that'll help us understand the growing criminal investigation into the Archdiocese of New Orleans a little better.
I don't know that we'll ever really understand it. I know you'll give us more knowledge of it, but it's just so shocking to hear what you guys are reporting.
Mind-boggling.
Will?
We have big news with Marriott and other properties being purchased across the street from the Ernest Morial Convention Center. It'll be interesting to watch developments as how and whether this impacts the river district that's proposed, because they may have some different feelings about building a new hotel.
All right, we'll see. Missy, quickly over to you.
I'll be keeping an eye on the use of force investigations regarding some of these protests, and also continuing action on that front.
Okay, all righty, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for joining us. And we will see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Public television is our passion. With so much content that WYES broadcasts and presents online, we are quite entertained and highly informed.
Please join us in supporting WYES.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.